if you compete in any sort of action pistol match, one of the skills you absolutely have to have is the ability to move safely while you're carrying a firearm. Doesn't matter if you shoot USPSA, IDPA, Action Steel, Pro-Am, even Steel Challenge requires some movement on the clock. So you have to be able to move safely while controlling the muzzle direction of your firearm. The good thing about this is you can completely practice this in dry fire. While obviously you're going to want to practice it in live fire also on the range, you don't have to do most of it that way. You're doing gun handling, not actually shooting. As such, all the gun handling aspects can be practiced in dry fire. So let's say that this direction towards the camera, is the back berm. As such, my 180 is here, and so I don't want my gun to go anywhere else. It's got to stay inside the 180. So you can practice your movement in dry fire. Obviously, again, all the rules, safety rules of dry fire go into play here. No ammunition in the area, make sure it's all clear, make sure you have a safe direction, etc. But in dry fire, we can simply practice our motion. And there's a couple things you want to build as normal habits for that. If I am on target, my finger's on the trigger, obviously I'm shooting. But when I'm done, as I pull my gun off target, my finger comes off the trigger and goes into register. Whether register for you means on the frame or up on the slide, whatever, but it comes into register as you move off. Then after that, the firearm stays pointed down range. It doesn't matter where I'm moving. If I'm moving this way, if I'm moving this way, if I'm coming forward, if I'm moving backward, the firearm stays pointed in the safe direction, straight into the back berm. I don't point it downward, I don't point it upward. There may be some side-to-side turning, but I am careful to keep it in front of the 180. And so in dry fire, you can practice finger on the trigger, off the trigger and move. Finger on the trigger, off the trigger and move. Finger on the trigger, and so on. Practice moving side to side. Practice going forward, and then pulling it off the trigger and shifting backward, and then coming back on. Every time you move, finger goes into register, so it is clearly off the trigger. Comes back on when you're time to shoot. When it's time to move, you move. Doesn't matter what direction you're moving. And then the finger goes back on the trigger when it's time to shoot. But if you're not shooting, finger is clearly outside of the trigger guard. Now, does this mean that anytime I'm moving, I've got to keep the gun strictly straight into the back berm? And the answer is no. As long as I keep it ahead of the 180, I'm fine. So I can turn and move this way with the gun pointed here. However, if I can run like this and have it pointed more downrange into the berm, I am keeping better muzzle control and keeping myself safer. If I go here and something happens and I accidentally turn the gun, that might be an issue. If it's here and the gun turns a little bit, suddenly it's not an issue. So it depends on what you have to do. If I have to run as fast as possible, running like this is a little awkward. As such, running like this might indeed be the fastest way. But that's because I'm going straight in that direction. I'm not trying to do anything else. If I'm trying to go that way and reload, I need to be more careful. So reloading while moving is another way or another time where you have to be excessively careful, not really excessively, extremely careful about what the muzzle is doing. If I'm shooting here and then I take my finger off the trigger and move this way, reloading is not difficult because, as we know, most people when they reload, they drop the magazine and they cant the gun so they can put the magazine in it, the new magazine at least. If I'm moving to my strong side, when I cant the gun, that actually helps it stay downrange, so it's not a big deal. If, on the other hand, I'm moving to my weak side, if I am already pointing this way and then I cant the gun, it may end up pointing in that direction. As such, if I'm moving to my weak side, you often see people having to reload like this to keep the muzzle pointed downrange, which is something, again, you can practice in dry fire. If I'm sitting here and I'm moving and I turn this direction, I can practice reloading in this fashion, I can practice reloading in this fashion, and so on. Practice reloading to move forward and backward. Practice keeping that muzzle controlled, pointed into the back berm. Again, if it goes slightly off from straight back, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to keep it in front of the 180. So practice that. Practice your motion. It doesn't matter which direction you're going. Practice your motion. And practice getting that finger off the trigger. One last thing. For this case, let's take that as the downrange direction. So in this case, I'm pointing straight downrange. All right, what if I need to move backwards and I have quite a distance to cover, so just stepping backwards a couple steps isn't going to do it? How can I do that safely? Well, there's kind of two different ways to do it. It completely depends on which direction you turn. So there's downrange. if I'm shooting here and I'm done and I want to move, if I turn into the gun, one of the things I can do is literally turn into it, keep the gun over my shoulder, and move this way. The gun is still pointed into the safe direction, into the back berm, and I can move quite easily. This is an excellent direction to turn if you need to reload as you go, because as I go here, I can simply reload like this and keep moving and do so completely safely. All right, what if I'm turning away from this? Well, if I shoot here, I push this away from me, turn in the other direction, and run away from it. Now, the part you have to be careful of for that sort of thing is when you come back to the gun. So, back to this being the safe direction. If I'm shooting here, I turn away from it so I can run. When I come back, I have to make sure that I come back to the gun as opposed to I bring the gun back to me. If I bring the gun back to me, I tend to do this sort of thing, and if that's the safe direction, that's breaking the 180. So, if I'm shooting here and I need to move up range fast, I can do that. Or if I turn away from the gun, I can do that. Either one of those works perfectly well and keeps the gun that way and also not pointing at any portion of my body. If I turn this way, it's actually easy to control the gun, but you have to make sure it stays above your shoulder or completely outside of your body. Above tends to work better for that sort of thing. And again, all of that, every single piece of that is something you can practice in dry fire. So make sure your movement is good and safe. You'll need it for every type of action pistol match.